take it kindly.
You made a very interesting analysis of how people use or misuse God, but you made no argument about God himself. And by attacking the quote wicked unquote use of God does not at all address the existence of God.
Now, I didn't say that God was misused. I hope I wasn't so poorly understood by everybody. I said that the idea of God is a dictatorial one to begin with, the belief in a supreme, eternal, invigilating creator who knows what you think and what you do and cares about it and will reward or punish you and watches you while you sleep is, I think, a horrific belief, a man-made one. Grief, so it hadn't really sunk in on me that as you were being ordained, when I was 9, I was just getting out of there completely. I was 9 when I thought I saw through it, when my biology teacher told me that God was so good as to have made vegetation green because it was the color most restful to our eyes. And I thought, Mrs. Watts, this is nonsense. I knew nothing about chlorophyll or photosynthesis, nothing about the theory of evolution, nothing about adaptation, nothing of the sort. I just knew she'd got everything all wrong. And of course the argument against faith, against religion, falls into two essential halves, not necessarily congruent, but I believe congruent. The first is, it's not true. Religion comes from the infancy of our species. I won't say race because I don't think our species is subdivided by races. Infancy of our species, when we didn't know that the Earth went round the sun. We didn't know that germs caused disease. We didn't know when we were told in Genesis, you're given dominion over all creatures, that this did not include microorganisms, because we didn't know they were there. So you didn't know they had dominion over us. When diseases broke out, it was blamed on wickedness, or sometimes on the Jews. Or if it was by Jews, on the Amalekites, or as you will. We didn't know anything about the nature of the Earth's crust, how it was cooling, earthquakes, storms, all of this were a mystery. Well, we are at least to that extent a reasoning species. Even a conspiracy theory is often better than no theory at all. The mind searches for form. We're now stuck with the forms that we found in our infancy, in our primitive, barbaric past. Well, that could be fine still. No nation can be without mythology or myth or legend. And there are people who say, well, it's not exactly true. Virgins don't conceive, okay. Bushes don't burn forever, although why that would be so impressive, I've never understood. Dead men don't walk, and so on and so on. Okay, you're right. It's not really true. It does come from a rather fearful period of the Dark Ages, but at least it's nice to believe it. It teaches good precepts. This, I think, is very radically untrue. I give in my book the example, which I'll give you now, of a person very much influential on my youth, and I know on the Reverend's too, Dr. Martin Luther King. My friend Taylor Branch's book about Dr. King, I would rather call him Doctor than Reverend, because I'm sorry to say I think it's a higher title of honor. Taylor Branch's trilogy about him is called Parting the Waters, The Pillar of Fire, and At Jordan's Edge. And everybody literate here knows the story of Exodus and understands what Dr. King meant when he demanded that his people be free of bondage. But if you think about it for a second, it's a very good thing that the good doctor was only using this metaphorically. If he'd really been invoking the lessons of Genesis and Exodus, he would have been saying that his people had the right to kill anyone who stood in their way, to exterminate all other tribes, to mutilate their children's genitalia, to make slaves of those they captured, to take the land and property of others, to engage in rather long and hideous and elaborate arguments about ox goring, and finally, which is the sentence that ends that, or the verse that ends that section of the book, should not suffer a witch to live, the warrant for witch burning. In other words, in these books, there are the warrants for genocide, for slavery, for the torture of children, for disobedience, for genital mutilation, for annexation, for rape, and all the rest of it. It's a very good thing that this is man-made. There are those who say that they wish they could believe, and I suppose a decent atheist could say that if only for lack of evidence he wishes he or she could. I can't be among their number. I'm very glad it is not true that there is a permanent, unshakable, unchallengeable celestial supervision. A divine North Korea in which no privacy, no liberty is possible from the moment of conception, not just till the moment of death, but until well after. I've been to North Korea, and now I know what a prayerful state would look like. I know what it would be like to praise God from dawn till dusk. I've seen it happen. And it's the most disgusting and depressing and pointless and soulless thing you can picture. But at least with North Korea, you can die and you can leave. Christianity won't let you do that, because I mentioned another thing about the Old Testament. The Old Testament may have, any Jews and Christians who like it may like this too. They may have genocide, rape, racism, all the rest of the things I've mentioned, but it never mentions punishment of the dead. When you're done, when you're in the mass grave into which you've been thrown as an Amalekite, it's over. Not until gentle Jesus, meek and mild, is the concept of hell introduced. Eternal torture, eternal punishment for you and all your family for the smallest transgression. I have no hesitation in saying this is a wicked belief. I've also no hesitation in saying, and I mustn't trespass on the Reverend's time, that we don't need it in two senses. One is it's wicked. Two, we have and always have had a much superior tradition. We know that Democritus and Epicurus worked out in ancient Athens the world was made of atoms, that the gods did not exist and certainly took no interest in human affairs, and would be foolish to do so, and would be wicked if they did. We have the tradition that brings us through Galileo and Spinoza and Thomas Paine and Voltaire and Thomas Jefferson and Bertrand Russell and Albert Einstein, men of great wisdom and insight, by all means struck by the awe-inspiring character of our universe, by all means open to devotional music and architecture and poetry, by all means aware of the transcendent, but look through the Hubble telescope if you want to see something that is awe-inspiring. And don't look to blood-stained old myths. Now, why now? Why am I doing this now, people ask? Well, I'll tell you why now, because in the last few years it's become impossible to turn a page of a newspaper without being, as the religious would say, offended. In other words, I don't think I sound self-pitying if I say that I'm offended that a cartoonist in a tiny democratic country in Scandinavia, Denmark, can't do his job without a death threat, and that no American magazine or newspaper would reprint those cartoons, either to elucidate the question or in solidarity. I'm offended that civil society in Iraq is being destroyed, leveled by the parties of God. I'm offended that people in this country believe that they have the right to advocate the teaching of garbage to children under the fatuous name of intelligent design. I believe that we're... I thought you'd never clap. Just as I believe that where religion ends, philosophy begins, where alchemy ends, chemistry begins, where astrology ends, astronomy begins, and now the people will say, well, let's give equal time to astrology in the schools. It's nonsense, dangerous and sinister nonsense. The Pope says, AIDS may be bad, but condoms are much worse. What kind of moral teaching is this? And how many people are going to die for such dogma? You see what I mean? I'll be very brief. There's an end to this, an end particularly to the cultural cringe that says that if someone can claim to be a religious spokesman, they are entitled to respect. I have to say it in your presence, sir. I think that the title Reverend is something people should be more concerned to live down than to live up to. Thank you.
When we look at history, it's clear that many core Christian claims collapse under basic evidence. The Genesis creation story says the earth was made in 6 days about 6,000 years ago. But geology, radiometric dating, and fossil records prove our planet is over 4.5 billion years old, and that life evolved over hundreds of millions of years. The Bible describes a global flood in Genesis 6 through 9, yet ice core samples from Greenland and Antarctica show uninterrupted layers of snow and ice dating back 100,000 years, no sign of a worldwide deluge. Scripture commands horrific acts. In 1 Samuel 15:3, God orders the slaughter of men, women, children, and animals. In Exodus 21:20-21, slavery is condoned outright. These are not moral foundations. They are relics of an ancient, tribal society. Science explains what religion once guessed at. Germ theory replaced the idea that disease is divine punishment. Evolution by natural selection, supported by DNA evidence, explains life's diversity far better than intelligent design. The Hubble telescope shows galaxies billions of light years away. Impossible in a 6,000-year-old universe. And Christian teachings still cause harm today. The Catholic ban on condoms worsened the AIDS crisis. Creationist lobbying undermines education. And religious intolerance fuels violence worldwide. When moral progress happens, abolition of slavery, women's rights, ending segregation, it's been driven by human reason and empathy, not by obeying Bronze Age texts.
I think that
I take it
you
kindly.
made a very interesting analysis of how people use or misuse God, but you made no argument about God himself. And by attacking the quote wicked unquote use of God does not at all address the existence of God or non-existence of God. We are sitting in a room that, because of lights, we assume that there is electricity in the building. Electricity can light up a room or burn it down. It does not mean electricity does not exist because it burns the building down, or that it is inherently wicked. It is how people use it. So clearly, people have misused God as they've misused other things that are possibly positive. But its existence is not in any way proven or disproven by you giving a long diatribe on those that have mishandled and misused God, because there are many that you can cite that have acted in a way that shows the goodness of God. Your book, God Is Not Great, could be refuted by many that feel he is great or she is great, whatever way you relate to God. Science, to me, does not wipe away the existence of God, because science had to start somewhere. So to pick up mankind in its evolving state does not tell me where mankind began, how it became a long story of ordered steps. Well, who ordered them? Why do things follow such a natural progression? Who set the progress? And in fact, even the term wicked, if there is no God and if there is no supreme mechanism that governs the world, what makes right right and what makes wrong wrong? Why don't we just go by whoever's the strongest at any given period in history? Because nothing is wicked, because whoever's in power at the time would determine what is wicked and what is not wicked, because there's no real moral code, because there's nobody to judge that. So at one hand, we're going to argue God doesn't exist. On the other hand, we're going to call people wicked. Wicked according to who? And according to what? It would be based on whoever has the power at that time. So I think that the real thing that I'm interested in, Mr. Hitchens, is to really discuss the idea of God and the idea of a supreme being, and how creatures and creation have just by some great coincidence, an unexplained scheme, follows some order that just happened by itself. Something, some force, some overruling force had to set all of that pattern in, and it continues thousands of years later. Can you give a million examples of where people have misused that, where they've distorted it, where in the name of God or North Korea or other tragedies have happened? Yes. In terms of the civil rights movement, it was absolutely fueled by a belief in God and a belief in right or wrong. And had not there been this belief that there was a right and a wrong, civil rights movement that you alluded to or that you referred to would not have existed, because what made it wrong for people to be slaves? What made it wrong for humans to be treated unequally? Because there was nobody to say that they were all equal. It was whoever had the strength. But at the end, what is refreshing is that you are a man of faith, because any man that at this date still has faith that there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, has more faith than any religious person I know.
Sharpton's electricity analogy fails because we can directly measure electricity. It has observable properties, equations like Ohm's law, and can be demonstrated on demand. God has no such measurable evidence. Simply pointing to order in the universe isn't proof of design. Complex order can emerge naturally from physical laws. Snowflakes form intricate patterns without a designer. Evolution explains life's diversity through cumulative natural selection, not preset ordered steps. The first cause argument ignores that physics shows how matter and energy behave without invoking a supernatural agent. Quantum fluctuations can produce particles from a vacuum, and cosmology explains the universe's development from the Big Bang onward. As for morality, history shows moral codes predate Christianity. The Code of Hammurabi, 1750 BCE, set laws long before the Bible. Morality is rooted in empathy, cooperation, and the social contracts that allow humans to thrive, not divine decree. If morality required God, then God's own commands in Scripture, like ordering genocide in 1 Samuel 15:3, would be good, yet by today's standards they're horrific. The civil rights movement wasn't exclusively powered by religion. Leaders like Bayard Rustin drew on secular human rights ideals, and morality is equally championed in secular societies today. A belief system isn't validated by the good some people do in its name, just as belief in Zeus or Odin wasn't proven by acts of kindness in their followers.
The belief that there were weapons of mass destruction, or rather the conviction that Saddam Hussein was interested in weapons of mass destruction, you could, I suppose, describe as an argument from design. In other words, he'd had them before, he'd known how to conceal them, he'd used them several times, he seems to be prepared to risk his entire political career on the idea of reacquiring them. I would say that was not a belief that had no evidence, and I would say that anyone who treated him as if he was innocent on the subject would be a sap, actually, would be my short word for it. Second, on the civil rights movement, I expected you to be more assertive. I don't know what Dr. King's private convictions about religion were. I know that he studied Hegel, I know that he studied Marx, I know that among his very close entourage were a large number of secular socialists and communists. You know their names too. Stanley Levinson is probably the best known, but among the black civil rights leadership, Bayard Rustin, secular socialist, Philip Randolph, secular socialist trade union leader. These were the building blocks for the March on Washington, as was Victor Reuther and many others. The belief that it is illegal as well as evil to keep black Americans in subjection does not require any supernatural endorsement. It had been proved repeatedly in law and in morality and in ethics, and demonstrated in practice. The only thing that had always been consistently justified by the churches was initially slavery, the right to hold someone as a slave, biblically warranted, and the right to keep the races separate, which is endorsed by a church that, just to give a contemporary example, one of the current candidates for the Republican nomination is a member of a church, the so-called Mormon Church of Latter-day Saints, that until 1965 had it as an article of faith that the Bible separates the sons of Ham and makes them lesser. Well, I don't have to discredit a text like that because I don't think it has any authority. So in a sense I return the question to you. Now, I didn't say that God was misused. I hope I wasn't so poorly understood by everybody. I said that the idea of God is a dictatorial one to begin with, the belief in a supreme, eternal, invigilating creator who knows what you think and what you do and cares about it and will reward or punish you and watches you while you sleep is, I think, a horrific belief, a man-made one, fortunately. I'm very glad there's no evidence for it. Let me, in case I was misunderstood, let me assert again, I think it's innately an awful belief. However, the cleverest theologian, and have been some, has never been able to demonstrate that such a person exists. It's impossible to do so. It's not possible either for me to demonstrate conclusively that no such person exists. That cannot be done either. But one thing can be done. A person who claims not to know only that this person exists, a task beyond our brain, but to claim to know his or her, I accept your correction, Reverend, mind, to say, I know, because I'm in holy orders, what this entity wants you to do, what he wants you to eat, who he wants you to go to bed with, and how he wants you to go to bed with them, what you may read, in what associations in private you may form, what thoughts you may have. That person is out of the argument now, it seems to me. We know that no one knows that. So the claim made by the religious that they know God, they know his mind, and they can tell us what to do in his name is, I think, exploded. Further, it is not argued by my side, at any rate, or by no one I know on it, that our presence here on the planet is something that is susceptible of a smooth, logical, reasonable explanation. To the contrary, we are still very much in doubt as to precisely how we came to be human and to separate ourselves from some of our common ancestors. And, we also know that of the species that have been on this small planet, in this tiny solar system, since the beginning of measurable time, of the number that were ever in existence, more than 98.9% have become extinct. A certain solipsism, I think, is required to believe that we, as a resulting species, are somehow the center of the created cosmos. This is not modesty, as the Christians call it. It's not humility. It's an unbelievably arrogant claim to make. But at least it makes up for the other claim we're supposed to put up with, which is, well, yes, but we're also miserable sinners conceived in filth and doomed to abject ourselves. Both of these positions are too extreme, too strenuous, too fanatical, and both of them reinforce each other in unpleasant ways, and both should be outgrown by us.
Hitchens dismantles the idea that morality or justice requires divine authority. The civil rights movement wasn't purely a religious project. Key figures like Bayard Rustin and A. Philip Randolph were secular humanists. The legal and ethical basis for ending segregation and slavery came from constitutional law, Enlightenment philosophy, and universal human rights, not the Bible. In fact, churches were some of the strongest defenders of slavery, citing verses like Ephesians 6:5 and 1 Peter 2:18 to justify it, and many Christian denominations opposed racial integration well into the 20th century. He's right that the concept of an all-seeing, all-judging God is not just unsupported by evidence, it's dictatorial by design. No one can prove God exists, but religion claims to know his mind, his rules, and how everyone should live. That's not humility, that's authority without evidence. Science openly admits it doesn't yet have every answer about human origins, but it has uncovered far more than religion ever did. From fossil records tracing human evolution to the staggering fact that over 98% of all species have gone extinct, showing we're not the center of creation. To believe otherwise is not modest faith, but human arrogance wrapped in theology. If we can build moral systems, laws, and compassion without appealing to invisible authority, why keep clinging to a worldview that's historically fueled slavery, segregation, and censorship? What do you think? Is morality stronger when it's grounded in reason and evidence rather than divine command? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more debates and deep dives.